Welcome to our series, The Probabilistic Model of Providence. It's going to be referred to as PMP as a shorthand. So, this series is attempting to diagnose the condition of reality. And I think that before we get into the abstract theology or the heavy scripture applications, it would be good to talk about the PMP through the locus of film. Because the world of film is a lot simpler. It's got rules, it's written professionally, and it shows us human stories that are just an easier level of analysis to comprehend. So, kicking off this series, I'd like to introduce a format to us, PMP at the movies. And the first movie we are going to talk about is the movie Clueless. My family are, for whatever reason, huge fans of this movie. I've seen it a million times. Oh, in PMP, there is a set of principles and a set of mechanisms. We are going to be talking about the principles today. And I want to do an overview of these principles. And from there, I want to go ahead and apply these to the movie Clueless. Well, this is the list of principles. And we are going to be starting with non-linearity. So reality is inherently non-linear, and you are not going to need a high-level mathematics degree in order to understand the basic premise of this concept, which is that small changes lead to big outcomes. This was addressed in my lecture on providence and non-linearity. We basically pointed out that over a course of a week, you might have 10 conversations and 9 of them don't change things, but 1 of them changes everything. That is an example of nonlinearity applied to human life. Next, I want to talk about curated conditions. This is the concept that the God as Curator series stems from. We've determined that we're not determinists. That as man goes through life, he has options to choose between different paths. These are all different contingencies. However, as we discussed in one of our models on the last video, these contingencies aren't equally weighted. So if you have 3 options, you might be very likely to choose one and unlikely to choose the other 2. As we go through life, one way to look at it is we are accumulating probabilities, because your past makes you more likely to do something in the present. Then we have the fractal fall. My lecture, The Fractal Geometry of the Fall, basically made the point that a fractal is a model where the part represents the whole at every level of analysis. And we liken this to the fall, where Eve bit the apple, man has fallen, it's in our nature. And this fall is just as present in the biggest moral decisions we may have to make in our entire life, going down to the matter of months, down to the matter of weeks, all the way to a second-by-second analysis of how in your internal cognition, not even externally what you do, just your internal cognition, each second of the day, you have the choice to either be in alignment with God or out of alignment with God. Then we have ordered timing. This is a concept we explored in my lecture. It was about God and depression, where we find that events happen under divine sovereignty at the right time. They just happen at the right time. And with ordered timing in this theory, we are drawing a middle path, because one of the hardest questions about determinism is how evil can be divinely ordained. What I am proposing, and we'll go on to propose in a lot more detail later on in this project, but just for the purposes of now, is that it is not the act that is caused, it is the timing of the act that is ordered. And we saw in my depression lecture how different things that I wanted to happen when I was sick ended up happening or being better after I got healthy. Then we're going to move on to counterfeit providence. In this lecture, we talked about how Satan perverts God's means. That was evident in Job. As Satan destroyed Job's life, he used means that were inherently God's, but he perverted them. And I was making the argument in this lecture that providence in itself can be perverted, because as you're going down the wrong path, you may get those providential alignment feelings that you're going the right way, your community supports you, you're getting lucky, but this is all to a negative end, seen most notably in the early plot points in the movie Devil's Advocate, where what seemed like Kevin's ideal run, a divinely ordained run against all odds, actually had satanic motivations to it. And with counterfeit providence, we tease this out in the story of Joseph, how when his brothers are going to kill him, they get all excited, and it seems like providentially factors are aligning to kill him. They've already dug the pit, and the slave caravan happens to pull up at the last possible second and saves them. The argument with counterfeit providence is that the acts of Satan might be locally certain, but they are never globally certain. It is structured in the bounded nature of reality that there is always a path from order to disorder. It's just something about how reality works. And to put it in more religious language, there's always a path forward for grace, no matter how messed up a situation may seem. Nonlinear moral agency. This was discussed in my Theology Jam 2, when I was talking about how people who are mentally ill are victims of the butterfly effect, but can go ahead and be agents of the butterfly effect. In the same way reality is nonlinear, we have nonlinear moral agency. I guarantee you that there is something you can do today with someone you know that can have vast consequences across social networks and even across geographies. Reality is structured in such a way that an act of good can have far-reaching consequences. And then lastly, omniscience of contingencies, most notably explained in my lecture, Omniscience of Contingencies, is the argument that God has foreknowledge not just of what was and is to come, that would be deterministic if there was only one thing, one path, one iteration of reality. What we're saying is that God has sovereignty and foreknowledge over what could be, what could have been, and what may become. Well, these are the 7 principles as I've described them here, and as you can see throughout my earlier work, they've all come to fruition to be put into a broader theory. And now we are going to take these principles and run them through the lens of the movie Clueless. So Clueless is a story about wealthy high schoolers in California. This starts us with Cher's internal monologue. She says her daddy is a litigator. He makes $500 an hour just to argue with people, but he argues with me for free because I'm his daughter. Also with Cher and Dion, they're friends because people are jealous of them. They're both named after great singers of the past who used to do infomercials. So this is a non-linear system because in this high stakes, high barrier to entry friend group, one person's actions can have vast consequences on the friend group and the rest of the school. And this is most clearly exhibited in the first conflict of the movie, which is that Cher and Dion trick 2 teachers into falling in love. And after they do, they both become so happy that they improve everyone's grades. So a small change, this one teacher's relationship, leads to better academic outcomes for everybody. So now let's go over to curated conditions. I said earlier that reality looks a lot like simply accumulating probabilities, because your past makes you more likely to act different ways in the present. Cher has spent her whole life in this situation. She grew up around these people. She's always been wealthy. So when you see her sharp wit or her calculating different social dynamics or her eventual decision to adopt Ty, these are all based off of probabilities she's accumulated as she's aged, and these probabilities have constrained her actions so that instead of turning the other cheek with Amber, she is most likely to disagree with her about fashion choices and about quality of academic presentation, and they're just enemies. This is based off of the curated conditions. Now, with the fractal fall, man has fallen. I think the best way to think about it is that there is a cardinal sin that someone has as a byproduct of their character that displays itself at all levels of analysis. So Cher's cardinal sin is pride. And can you blame her? Can you blame her for her pride, given her curated conditions? She thinks she is at the top of her game. She thinks that her will should be done on her social environment, and she has the skill set, curated conditions, to carry out this will. But she happens to believe that she is correct. And as you know, if you've seen the movie, it's this exact mindset that propagates throughout the film in order to cause her to act in ways that are wrong, and these have bad effects going back to her. So now let's talk about ordered timing. It's a movie, the plot's written smartly, but I think the principle is sound, that one thing after another happens in a perfectly aligned time frame. So Ty moves to California and goes to gym class where she meets Cher and Dion right at the perfect timing that Cher has already done the good work with Miss Geist and Mr. Hall, so she wants to do other good deeds. So if Ty had showed up before that, Cher would have probably judged her, looked down on her, wouldn't have adopted her into the friend group. Josh moving back, the perfect catalyst, because Cher's world is in order. She controls everything. Josh moving back disrupts this order, but it also is the impetus for the rest of the film's plot. Even the party in the valley where Murray shaves his head, where Cher steers Travis away from talking to Ty, that party is perfectly timed because we've seen all of the plot points leading to it have the perfect not only moment in time but setting to converge to spur on Elton rejecting Ty, Elton coming on to Cher, her getting abandoned, her getting robbed, and then her calling Josh, and then Josh coming in as the savior of that night on the perfect timing, which begins to cement or change Josh's relationship to Cher. Because seeing Josh walk his girlfriend to the door is the impetus that she decides she needs a boyfriend of her own, because she's so fascinated with getting Ty a man, she doesn't think that she needs one, then she decides she does, and of course that's when Christian comes on the scene. As you can see, the timing is perfectly synchronized. So now let's go to counterfeit providence. We've talked about Cher's pride and the fractal fall, and all of a sudden this starts to catch up to Cher. She doesn't think she needs to study for the driving test. She doesn't get her license. She's wrong about Christian, and that disappoints her. Ty takes over as queen of the school, so Cher empowered Ty, and then after the two guys at the mall hang her over the edge and she thinks she's going to die. Now all of a sudden, Ty is the queen bee, and Dion begins to align more with Ty. So as you can see, things are closing in around Cher. She's not having a good time. And after she fails the driving test, and Ty says that particularly savage but biting remark to her that I won't repeat on this channel, she's at her lowest. She is in the pit. And that's when she goes on that walk to the mall, and she's reflecting, and that is where she reflects back on Josh. And she realizes that the whole movie, the whole story, has really been about changing her view of him. And that, in a simplistic movie way, is that path from disorder to order, because of course, Cher's newfound love of Josh, which she didn't realize the whole time, is what redeems her moving forward into the movie. Because now she likes Josh, she feels like she's not good enough for Josh, and this gets her to go to the last section of the film, which is the nonlinear moral agency. Because Cher takes it upon herself to be a good person, to change, because she doesn't think she's good enough for Josh. So what does she do? She becomes captain of the Pismo Beach Disaster Relief Club, and in doing so does a lot of good for the people in Pismo Beach who are on the outs, because I think there was a hurricane. But this action leads directly to her reconciling with Ty and reconciling with Travis, and since she no longer opposes their relationship, it emerges naturally. And the movie ends with all the girls happy and all the guys happy. So that would be the 7 principles. Oh, one more. Omniscience of contingencies. So we've described that reality is bounded, structured, and plural. All of these plot points where Cher makes critical choices along the way, it was physically possible for her to make another choice. That was something that was set in the mind of God and in the bounded structure of reality. So that would be Clueless if we apply the 7 principles of PMP to it. I hope that was a good display of my nearly omniscient knowledge of the movie Clueless, which is, like I said, it just runs in my family. I hope you enjoyed. I look forward to continuing to develop this theory with you. Hopefully we get more opportunities to do a PMP at the movie lecture. I really enjoyed this, so thank you and God bless.